Ever since Dragonflight, Blizzard has been making strides to improve the in-game user interface option for players to reduce the need for add-ons. Since the new cooldown tracking feature is being added on April 22nd, I wanted to talk about it. In patch 11.1.5, or as of April 22nd, 2025, players will be able to access a new feature via the in-game menu. This option is the Cooldown Manager. If you enable this, it's going to show all your class's cooldowns, both major and minor, on a bar separate from your action bars. In-game currently, we really don't have any good option for this. It's essentially just a resource HUD which includes a health bar and a very poor buff tracker. This new option can replace a lot of the basic class weak ores that most players use. Obviously, weak ores may still be preferred by a lot of players. For one, weak ores have a much larger spectrum of capabilities. Not to mention, the new Blizzard system is in a state of infancy. The potential that this can have, though, is exponential as Blizzard develops it, and even in this state, it's probably still a great option or a great segue for new players to get into customizing their UI and playing the game more optimally if that's their end goal. So, like I said, this is accessed through the in-game menu. Once you enable it, it will auto-populate with all of your class's cooldowns. It will also have a utility bar, which is separate from the cooldown bar. It also provides you with a buff bar, which tracks what Blizzard deems a worthwhile buff. More on that later. Lastly, you're going to get this fancy little progression bar tracker, which shows your class's major defensive abilities or offensive abilities. These are all separate from each other, which is great, and can be enabled to show all the time, just when in combat, or never. So the player has the agency to pick and choose which bars they want to track. At first, I was hoping that you would be able to pick and choose which abilities you would like to track. For example, if I didn't want to track Exploding Keg for some reason on my Brewmaster Monk, I could enable or disable this ability from the tracker. Unfortunately, you cannot, unless I just can't find it. This isn't necessarily a big deal, but it does mean it's fairly restrictive. This isn't a la carte. Either you get all of it, meaning the cooldown tracking, or you get none of it. This is something I think Blizzard could implement in the future, but for now I would say this is a small loss for this new system. This is the same with the progression bars as well. On my Brewmaster Monk, this will only show Weapons of Order, Dampen of Harm, and Fortifying Brew. This is a great start, don't get me wrong, as these are some of the most important cooldowns to have progression bars for. But similar to the cooldown tracking, it would be nice to be able to select certain buffs that you can opt in for tracking. Personally, I think it would be great to be able to track Diffuse Magic or the Black Ox, or even smaller buffs like Rushing Jade Wind or Charred Passions. Moving on to the utility bar, I like this bar the most because I don't really care to enable or disable anything that's being tracked here. I'm glad they are separate from the active cooldowns. You can also choose to disable this if you'd like. You can move it around, you can lower the opacity or make it smaller or larger. The only thing that would be cool is if you can change the order of the spells that they appear in, and that honestly goes for the cooldown tracker as well. And last but not least, we have the buff bar. The buff bar, I think, overall hits the nail on the head for the most part. Obviously, I'm looking at this just from the Brewmaster's perspective, but even as a Brewmaster, Blizzard, I think, are tracking some buffs that I don't think are all necessarily that important. And there's others that I think are missing at the moment. For example, Shuffle is being tracked, but it's completely passive. This gets applied during your rotation, and while it's extremely important to have active, I don't think it's worth tracking. The only time it won't be applied while in combat is if you're AFK, or on a very specific raid boss fight, where you may have many moments of downtime like Mythic Sarkareth back in Aberrus. On the other hand, the buff tracker fails to track some buffs like Press the Advantage, Celestial Flame, Wisdom of the Wall, or even your Vitality. While for the majority of players this won't make or break anything, since this seems to be more of an all or nothing system, I think it should include all of the buffs. It would be great in the future if it was a la carte where you can pick and choose what you want to track and what you don't, but for now I think they need to include some of these buffs even if they're not played all that often, like Press the Advantage or Celestial Flame. Overall, I'm pretty impressed by this feature. While I am someone who currently uses weak auras on live servers and will probably continue to use them for a long time, I think this feature is a great alternative to players who are either new or want to reduce the amount of auras they have. While the structure still feels a little bare bones, I'm hopeful that this will be something similar to what Blizzard's done with the UI interface back in Dragonflight, and that it's only going to keep getting better. Like I said, the biggest thing Blizzard can do is allow players to add or remove certain abilities to track. There are so many pros and cons to a system like this, and it's going to be fine for new players just to be able to enable it and get into their adventure, but I think for some players who are looking to improve, the option should be in there. Anyways, that's it. This feature is going to be available on April 22nd, so possibly by the time you are watching this video. I do want to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters who allow me to make videos like this. Anyways, I hope you have fun in patch 11.1.5, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.